In just over the last decade, we've gotten to play a lot of really interesting games from DC. We've had the Injustice games, which have been fighting games with campaigns attached to them. We've gotten the Lego Batman games, which have been great for families and kids to play through and get to experience Batman's lore in a more family-friendly setting. Batman the Telltale series is an IP that a lot of fans of my channel really appreciate and have had a lot of fun with, but far and away the most popular DC video game franchise of the last decade has been the Batman Arkham games, and now we're going into territory where there isn't really a new Batman Arkham game on the horizon. I suppose it's possible that sometime within the next decade they'll return to make another Batman Arkham game, but as of right now, Warner Brothers Games Montreal, who worked on Arkham Origins, have rebooted the Batman IP in video games into Gotham Knights, a game which does not feature Batman, but instead features his sidekicks taking the lead. Rocksteady, which is the studio that was primarily making the Batman Arkham games, they made Asylum City and Night, have moved over to making Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. It's a sequel to the Arkham games, but again, Batman is not a playable character of that game. And now Monolith, who is actually working on the Lord of the Rings Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War games, have shifted to making Wonder Woman, which I think will be very interesting. I think that that is by far the closest thing to Batman Arkham that we're seeing get developed right now, as it is a return to that single-player open-world experience where you're just playing the story as Wonder Woman. The other games from Rocksteady and Warner Brothers Games Montreal have really leaned into multiplayer capacity and trying to get really experimental on what they did with the Arkham games in the past, but right now we are focused on Gotham Knights. It is releasing in 4 days, it's coming right up, and I want to talk about how I think it is going to change the entire landscape of DC games forever. The first thing that I really think that it does is it's starting to show that Warner Brothers understands that the Arkham formula isn't necessarily the only one that works, and I also think it's very wise to start branching off and experimenting with new gameplay mechanics, as the Arkham games were great, but it was essentially the same, though it was evolving over the course of the decade that those games were releasing. We also, I think, could have started to experience some fatigue if we didn't start branching away from it. Gotham Knights retains a lot of Arkham gameplay mechanics, but it also, again, adds multiplayer. It has expanded the city. It has added some customization and other RPG elements to try and keep the experience fresh and to give players something new to experience. It's also rebooted the continuity. It is not a sequel to the Arkham games, and I think that the hope there is that they can reinvigorate some excitement from people who maybe didn't necessarily gel with the continuity of the Batman Arkham games. They're trying to keep it fresh and let Warner Brothers Games Montreal create something that's just so distinct from Arkham that, once again, I think the freshness will really play a factor into people's enjoyment of the game. On the other hand, you still do have the Arkhamverse, which is being continued by Rocksteady, albeit in another IP, but I think Gotham Knights also shows that Warner Brothers isn't scared to leave behind the Arkham brand and try something different. I think that's very exciting, and I think that it shows a lot of initiative in what we could see in the future from other characters. If a character like Superman or The Flash got a game, they could be set in their own universe as well, and they could perhaps make references to Gotham City, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be linked to the Batman Arkham series, and it wouldn't have to be constrained by the plot points that have happened now in the Arkham games or Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and these characters could be independent of the iteration that has been dreamed up by Rocksteady. I also feel that Gotham Knights is giving permission to developers to pitch ideas that might not be the most obvious. As I mentioned in my most recent video, I'm kind of shocked in some ways that Gotham Knights got greenlit, in the sense that it doesn't feel like the next step after Batman Arkham. Many of us were theorizing that we'd be seeing a Superman game next or a Flash game next, and while Wonder Woman feels pretty predictable, I don't think Suicide Squad or Gotham Knights are the games that the fans would have necessarily even requested, much less considered being the priority for Warner Brothers to turn into video games. With that being said, I think what both Rocksteady and Warner Brothers Games Montreal are doing with their respective titles looks very interesting. It looks like something that hasn't been done before on either side of that coin. I think that they are both implementing multiplayer in very different ways from each other, which I think is just super exciting, and I'm really excited to play through both games. The one thing that I will say has me a little bit concerned about the trajectory of DC games and what I think could confuse mainstream audiences in the future is the fact that they are not a cohesive universe. Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad do not share a universe. Wonder Woman, I would imagine, is set in her own universe. Maybe it will be a sequel to Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, but my guess is that she will have her own built-out universe, just like Batman did in the Arkham games. And again, I don't know that they're really prioritizing a connection between Wonder Woman and the other DC games launching. Now, in some ways, I think that there's a huge positive side to this, which is that then when we get the Wonder Woman game, they, again, won't have to connect to the stories of what have happened previously. We won't need 600 references to the Batman Arkham games. We won't need some big, oh, did you hear what happened in Gotham where Scarecrow gassed the whole city? They can just focus on Wonder Woman. They don't have to mention the events of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Again, maybe they'll try to connect it, but maybe they won't. I think the thing that makes it tricky is that Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League in the trailers have already really featured Wonder Woman and shown that she is going to play a pretty big role in that game. And I feel that this creates a bit of a problem where what if Rocksteady really wants to lean into the Wonder Woman lore after Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, but now they kind of can't because Monolith is working with that character. They'll just have to go in a different direction, which is fine. But I could see this limiting creativity between the teams as we move forward. I feel that what Warner Brothers is doing very right here is prioritizing DC games overall. Fans have been clamoring for new iterations of these characters, especially in video game format. Superman is a huge, highly requested game amongst the DC gaming audience, and I'm sure that he will make his due eventually. I'm sure that there is a Superman game somewhere on the horizon. I don't know when. I don't know if it will be connected to Batman Arkham or if it will be its own thing, but I do feel like what DC is potentially putting themselves in a corner with that Marvel games is not, is the usage of characters that other developers might want to use. I think that if Rocksteady is going to continue going in a multiplayer direction, this could be fixed by them working with IPs that are more in line with Justice League or other team-based superheroes. And with Warner Brothers Games Montreal, they could work with some of the smaller IPs. They could make a Green Arrow game. They could make a Birds of Prey game. And then Monolith could work on Wonder Woman and then Superman and build out a universe that is more single-player based. So I think that there are ways that you can utilize these same characters, sort of the same way that Spider-Man is in the Avengers game, but also has his own standalone single-player game. But in some ways, I feel that Marvel is maybe doing this better than DC is. In terms of their games, we'll have to wait and see as we get a few years into this new trajectory of DC games where we're getting more of them and just getting DC games in general. Arkham Knight came out in 2015, and we've been waiting on another open-world DC game since then. But now that we are looking at a world where we're probably going to be getting a DC game every year, at least for the next few years, we'll have to see how this plays out. But what Marvel has done so well is they have licensed a lot of characters and a lot of stories out to various developers. Square Enix got to do Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy. Insomniac has gotten to do Spider-Man and will now do Wolverine. We have a Black Panther and Captain America game coming out, and there are many other Marvel games on the horizon. And what I think they've done so well is they limit the characters that they license out. And as a result, there is a very definitive Spider-Man in games right now, and that is coming from Insomniac. And then Guardians of the Galaxy got to be separate from Spider-Man, but again, Guardians and Spider-Man are different enough that they're not really going to cross paths. And then with Avengers, it was a team-based game where Spider-Man wasn't the focus, so to have him pop up was fun, and it didn't need to be the same Spider-Man from the Insomniac games to work. I do think that with DC, if they start having too many versions of, say, Wonder Woman or Batman or Superman in games, I think it could get confusing. And look, while I am all for creative freedom and these studios having the right to create their own iterations and versions of these characters, I also will be honest and say that I'm kind of disappointed that neither Marvel nor DC is giving us a cohesive gaming universe for these characters. And I don't know, maybe they'll do something really creative. Maybe the Justice League game that is 5 years out will take the Arkham Batman and the Gotham Knights Superman and the Monolith Wonder Woman, and maybe it will be a multiverse game where the Flash has gone through the Speed Force and collected different characters from different universes to fight a cosmic threat. They could do something really creative with it, but I also just think it would be really cool to play Gotham Knights knowing that it's set in the Arkham universe, and then to hop into Wonder Woman knowing that it's the same Wonder Woman from Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. And so while I am on board with the creative freedom aspect of it, I do think that there could start to be some confusion amongst the mainstream and just some frustration as a player with there not being a very solid through line and having to hop between continuities. But overall, I think the pros vastly outweigh the cons. I'm very excited that we finally get to start seeing more AAA open world DC games. I hope we still get Injustice games from time to time. I hope that LEGO starts making more LEGO Batman games as well, because those are fun and a blast to play with the family. But those are my thoughts. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the trajectory of DC games, and we will see you guys in the next one.